Good morning, Recovery Clinic fans. How is everybody doing this morning? My name is Ashley. I'm a person in recovery, and I have Josh Foster here with me this morning. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning.
So before we get started, I just want to throw out there that this week is this week is the last week that we're getting all of those votes in for our peer awards at our peer conference coming up September 8th, 9th, and 10th. You should be looking for an email from Mid-South from Miss Charlotte, and you're going to make sure that you go in there and do that Survey Monkey where it says vote here. We want our awards to go to whoever our peer community really wants in those spots. It's going to be a great, great conference. We have a lot of special guests coming. We've got all kinds of interesting topics, and I cannot wait. So this morning, I have my friend Josh Foster, and he is the Discharge Coordinator / Peer Recovery Specialist at Serenity Park.
That's right.
That is right. And so my good friend Tucker Martin, he called me up and he said, hey, I've got this awesome, cool cat, and I want him to be on the recovery clinic. And I said, absolutely, let's do this. I have had an opportunity to speak with Josh outside of the recovery clinic today on several different times, and he really is a cool cat. And he's got some things that he brings to the table that other people, don't really do, And so I think he is a super great, cool dude. I think that he brings an aspect of recovery to Serenity Park that maybe they needed. I love my Serenity Park people. They are awesome.
They are, yeah.
So let's jump right in. So Josh,
Yes.
Tell me about you.
So Josh Foster. I'm currently, like you said, Discharge Coordinator / Peer at Serenity Park. I'm also 40 years old. I'm a father of 2 boys, 15 and 5. They take up a lot of my free time when I do have it. I'm avid in health and fitness. First and foremost, I am a follower of Christ, and that's how I got sober. But other than that, I spent 23 years in active addiction. Alcohol, all the drugs that go along with it, all the worldly pleasures that go along with it. And so now I'm in active recovery, a little over 2 years now in recovery. I also help out with faith-based recovery centers, do seminars here and there. That's me where I'm at now. It was definitely a long road to get here, though, and a bumpy one at that.
Right. I totally understand that. We were just talking about that before we came on the air. And we were talking about, some of the different aspects of life and the first part of recovery and how, we go through this period of time where we question everything about life, and then some of those, when we really get serious about recovery, some of those decisions that we make, like complete and utter surrender. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about early Josh. Tell me about your life when you were younger. What led you into drug addiction or alcoholism, and tell me all about those facets of your life. I think a lot of our viewers like to understand where we come from so that we have a level of connection that maybe other people out there don't.
Sure, a little relatability, transparency.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Stuttgart, Arkansas. I grew up on a farm. My dad was a farmhand. My mom had a few jobs. Just a quiet country life, really. I was shy. I was kind of introverted. I had a couple things go on younger in life that I didn't recognize as traumatic until I got older, until you start doing that work on yourself. And so a couple things happened early in life that kind of made me a little more introverted. I was really shy around girls. I always played sports, so I always had friends. I could hang out with anybody. Our town was pretty much, you were with the white kids or black. That was our town, white or black. But through sports, I was able to be cool with everybody. So I was always had friends on both sides of the track, so to speak.
Right.
15 years old, I'll cut back. 13, I got my first job because I needed money to go to a trip to New York. And so my mom was waitressing. She got me this job as a busboy dishwasher at this little place in Stuttgart called Cajun Hideaway. So that was really my first taste of like the service life, which if you know anything about behind the scenes of service life, there's drinking and other things going on.
Very much so.
And at that young age, I didn't really recognize how it was affecting me. But in retrospect, I can see how, because years down the road, I lived in the service industry. That was a lot of my work. And so that was probably a draw to it. And so that was my first taste of that. And then we go to 15, I get a job at the golf course there in Stuttgart. And I'm hanging out with the guys. The other people that worked there were high school work release. So they were the 18-year-olds, they were the seniors. There was a guy that was the cool guy that went to college and then moved back but still dated the high school girls, you know, that guy that bought beer for everybody.
Is that the cool guy?
He was to me back then. And so anyway, that was just part of our culture in that small town. You hit 15, you hit 16, you're driving up and down Main Street, you're drinking beer, you're finding a gravel road, you're finding a house party. That was just our culture. It was accepted by everybody there, really, parents, everything. And so 15 years old, I started work there, started hanging out with them. They had realized that I had never been out and drank before. And so they took me out one night. So I got a Route 44 fruit punch from Sonic and Tanqueray gin. That was my first, that was my first drink ever. And we're riding around in his Mustang. And so what happened was this introverted, shy kid all of a sudden gets a little liquid courage in him and a different personality comes out. I'm riding around, I've got senior girls sitting on my lap. I end up going to the senior party that night, get back to school Monday, and the word spreads that I'm hanging out with these older kids. And so it was like a boost for me. And so my brain really just intertwined like popularity, girls, and alcohol all in one night. And so this shy, introverted kid that never felt like he really fitted in. You know, I would fit in, I had friends, whatever, but you know, in the back of your head, you're always like, I just don't feel right here. And so you take a little alcohol into that, and then all of a sudden, this is the personality that I thought I could be and to fit in. So and then it progressed from a weekend thing, and then it's, you know, a couple times a week, and then all, you know, you're smoking pot, and then cocaine gets introduced, and then just the party drugs just kind of build, and before you know it, you're spiraling out of control. And I was in heavy addiction before I even realized it. And looking back on it, I didn't even know it, just because that was part of our culture. And then 18 rolls around. My father, who was in active addiction, commits suicide. And I was so numb being on all the drugs I was on, I never fully grieved it. Right. You know, didn't know how to handle it. And so, you know, your family asks if you're okay, how's everything going? And you just kind of say, yeah, I'm good. I'm dealing with it. And then from there, I go to college in Dallas. So I go from a population of 9,000 people, small town Arkansas, to Dallas, Texas to go to an art school, which I don't know if you know anything about art school or Dallas. You can find anything you want there. Exactly. So it opened me up to a different world. I went from cocaines and methamphetamines and alcohol to now I'm doing alcohol, hallucinogens, and it just really changed my life and went really on more of a spiritual path, which really took me more away from God than I thought I was going.
Right. So wow, I'm on information overload. That's incredible.
Yeah.
A lot of different aspects in there that I didn't really know, which is, you know, part of what makes a pseudical cat, right? So I want to kind of jump back and I want to talk about a few things.
Sure.
So we were talking about when you were 16 and the quote unquote cool guy, which I think now we would all kind of go Loserville, but you know, the cool guy at the time, the guy that the guy that everybody wants to be around.
Yeah.
So, and you were talking about that and you were talking about being a part of. And so prior to us getting on the air, we were talking about things that we see when people are wanting to get active in recovery. And one of the things that we talked about is that you want to hold on to that idea of being a part of and being one of everybody else. Like, you really want to fit in, you want to get in where you fit in. And it's really important somewhere in your psyche that you are just part of something.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, you have this piece in the back of your mind going, but I'm not like them. I'm not anything like them. I'm special. I'm different. And it keeps you from becoming wholly and completely a part of.
That's right.
Right. And so, I gravitate to whenever you were talking about that, and I was thinking about the conversation that we had before we went on air. And I was really thinking about how that's always been my life in general. And of course, the complete substance of all of that is me, 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 me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and then fast forward a little bit, man, I'm truly sorry to hear that had to be a part of your story, is having your father commit suicide, and that being, that's terrible. That's a tragedy. That's just something that is so difficult. And I recognize and I relate so much to losing people while you're in active addiction.
Yeah.
I lost all of the people who were closest to me in my life when I was in active addiction. And so one of the most difficult things that I had to do whenever I came into recovery was deal with those feelings.
Yeah.
Because I don't like feelings to start with. Anybody who knows me on a personal level, who talks to me daily, actually doesn't do feelings. If you start crying, I'm like, whoa, 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 I don't know what to do with that. Please stop.
Right.
Like, I don't like feelings. And so, having to have gone through that transition in early recovery of knowing that I should have had a feeling about that, feeling guilty because I didn't have a feeling about that, and now dealing with having those feelings. And it's so important for anyone out there struggling with feelings, because it's a real thing. Feelings are just feelings. They're not fact.
That's right.
And so they come and go, and they come and go quickly most of the time. And so, I felt like that was a part of your story that I felt we should definitely hit on, because I know that there are a lot of people out there that are going through something where they're having a difficult time dealing with pain and emotion from their past.
Yes.
And I continued to run from mine. I absolutely continued to run from mine until I became locked in a mental prison. And I had to deal with those things. And so then you started talking about going from duck hunting world, Stuttgart, Arkansas. Did you ever duck hunt?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So going from duck hunting world to, a giant city where, you could definitely find some way to fit in, get in where you fit in, and you did that.
Yeah.
And just for anybody out there who's never worked in the service industry, do yourself and all of the rest of us a favor and go work in the service industry for a good 6 weeks to 3 months.
And tip your server.
Absolutely. My stepdad says that he only gives 10% to God. And so I shun that because, that's how these people are making their livings.
Yeah.
20% are up. If they're having a bad day, up.
That's right.
So anyway, that was just a sidebar for all of you. I think it's important that people understand that working in the service industry is really difficult, and it is completely and wholly surrounded by all of those worldly things.
Yeah.
And it's not just drugs and alcohol, it's all of the behaviors that go with that. My first job in recovery was in the service industry. And I still have that job to this day on the weekends. And I love going to that job because it keeps me connected to my recovery life.
Exactly.
100%. So, okay, that's great. Let's go back to leading you astray from the God that you. So I know everybody in Arkansas knows some form of God whenever they're early in childhood, right?
Yes.
Being in the Bible Belt, and it's whatever your perception is whenever you're brought up, and so whenever you left and went to Dallas, you left that perception of God and you started finding your own spiritual path.
I left it long before.
Long before.
Yeah, I wasn't really raised in church. We would go, and I knew my family believed in God, but it wasn't really instilled in me like hardcore. So I was already on the spiritual path. I'd gotten into, probably around the time drugs and everything hit, I really got into interested in martial arts, and so that turned me on to Eastern philosophies, like your Taoism, your Buddhism. Got my first meditation book at 16. I mean, I was reading books on occultism, And I was just all over the place. I mean, I was always searching for something just to try to fill a void. You know, the 12 Steps likes to say, the God of your understanding. And for some people that works. For me, it didn't, because anytime I tried to understand a higher power, I still put myself at the center. And so it wasn't until I actually surrendered my life to the God of the Bible that I was able to transform my life. And it was making changes from the inside out, as opposed to me trying to understand God from the outside in.
I love that. I love that. So, you know, just keep going, Josh. Like you're killing it, man. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'm going to look at some of these talking points. But yeah, so where do we leave off? Dallas, yeah, so the spiritual thing that went along with the drug use and everything. And granted, this is 6 months after my father passed, and so I just really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I just kind of followed. I had a friend going to art school, so I just followed him. I like to draw, so I thought that was the next step. And that led me down a path. I come back home. I don't do anything with my degree because I'm still in addiction. I would blow off interviews, this and that. Then I get a job just doing random things. I was a manager at a retail store and met my first wife, got married, had a son, active addiction, divorce, ruined that relationship. Get a job at a place called Juanita's in Little Rock, serving, bartending, living that life that I thought I always wanted. You know, I always wanted the sex, drugs, and rock and roll life, and
Right.
I felt like I had it. And you know, that kind of goes back to that first night I drank, right? Tie it all back to when I first experienced alcohol and first experienced attention from girls. And you know, that's a key age for young men, 15, 16, 17, 18. For the longest part of my life, my dad was my hero, and he was my best friend, and he still was. But when I hit that point and I met these other guys that I thought had a life that I wanted, then they became my role models for manhood, my role models for what masculinity looked like. And so then I spent a lot of my life chasing after that validation. What validates me as a man? Is it talking to this girl? Is it going to this party? Is it hanging out with this person? Is it having this job? What is validating me here? And so I always looked for that validation outside, and that's a vicious cycle. That's just a dog chasing his tail, and that's what I did for a long time. And yeah, that just led me down a bad path. I would have little pieces of sobriety here and there. Could never put anything together solid, though, because of all these past traumas that I never knew. You know, you get these past traumas, you get these wounds, and you know, I had surgery not too long ago on my knee. I'm about 95%. I'll probably never have full range of motion, but you know, having that wound in my knee, I don't have full range of motion. So we get in our active addiction, early childhood trauma, then all of a sudden we're wounded spiritually, right? We're wounded in our heart, we're wounded in our mind. And so if we never deal with those, then we're going into every other relationship in our lives without the full range of mobility of our thought processes, without our ability to love, without our ability to express ourselves. And so that was me. I was going through life just wounded, right? They say if you don't heal from your wounds, you end up bleeding on people that didn't cut you. You know, that's a quote or a meme I read somewhere, and that's so true. And so I lived a lot of my life bleeding on people that didn't cut me, didn't hurt me. And finally dealt with my father, which was only a couple years ago when I started doing the relaunch stuff that we'll touch on here in a little bit. But yeah, you know, going through those traumas and those pains, you know, childhood trauma, a lot of people in addiction can relate to.
Yeah.
It's the easiest cop-out, right? I experienced this when I was a child. My dad did this, my mom was this way. And it's the easiest way to explain away our bad decisions because we don't want to take ownership for what we're doing.
That's right.
I don't want to take ownership for me picking up this drink, me taking that hit, right? I can easily blame it on what happened, but you know, what helped me heal from past traumas was, you know, my mom and dad were just people like me. You know, they were going through their own things. It's so hard to look at your parents and people in your life when you're a kid as regular people. It's hard to imagine the stresses they were dealing with. You don't want to see that. You just want to see that this was my mom, this was my dad. Something happened between me and them, and then now I'm scarred, and now I can use that for the rest of my life to explain away my bad behavior. And so me coming to terms with that really shaped the way I am as a man, a father, and friend going forward, and son, actually, going
Right.
forward. Yeah.
I understand that completely, you know. whenever I, was in full-blown active addiction up until, I got clean this go-around, and I started dealing with some of the things from my past, and I wholeheartedly accepted everything that I did. And, trauma looks different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your trauma and my trauma may not be the same, but we may react the same way.
Right.
And so, regardless of whatever trauma we've had in our past, it's how we overcome it. And in order to overcome, we surrender wholeheartedly, right?
Yeah.
And I love how you were just talking about your parents were just people just like us.
Yeah.
I think it's at times we forget that. Like I look back, and as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking back in my mind, and whenever I was younger, my dad was my dad, and he was my idol, and that's just the way it was. My parents had no faults, and they had no stresses, and they were perfect in every way.
Yeah.
And my dad still is perfect. Please don't misunderstand. He's always been perfect and always will. Love you, Dad. But we don't give them any grace for that.
Right.
We want to grasp onto things, little things that happened, and we want to hold them to the fire for it. So I'm grateful that you said that, because that's really something different and special that I've never heard that perspective necessarily on.
Right.
And that's fantastic. So I want to know how you got into recovery.
A couple car crashes. No. So I went through Serenity Park, the original Serenity Park, back in 2008. I really did it because the lawyer I had thought it would keep me out of jail for a DUI. I was drinking and driving and smashed into 4 cars at a stoplight. Luckily, no one was hurt. And so I was probably looking at, I just went just to get out of trouble, really. Just enough to learn like the science of it. Okay, alcoholism is an allergy, a disease. This is how it works. This is the scientific breakdown of it. But I wasn't ready to really work on the issues that made me drink in the first place. And that's where recovery really starts. But fast forward, a couple broken relationships and some jail time and issues later, 2018, I had stayed clean off alcohol for about 4.5 years, and I relapsed when things just got bad in the relationship I was in. I just couldn't handle the stresses of the family life, really. And so I turned back to alcohol. That was my quickest escape. You start where you think you're getting away with it, and then before you know it, you're sneaking here and there, and you're passing out, and people know what you're doing. But anyway, so I start getting back into church. I have family members that are in church, so I thought that would help me. Let me just get plugged into a church. Started getting in a men's group, start going to New Life's Regen group on Thursday nights. I met a guy named Blake Polston who was kind of running it back then. He now runs M18. And so I started chopping it up with him, and my youngest son's mom had put the bug in my ear of John 3:16 Ministries. I was looking for a recovery center around Little Rock, but I had no insurance. And if you have no insurance, you need to come up with about $12,000 or $15,000 to get into a 30-day treatment center. So that's really when the idea of a faith-based center came along, because they're free. And so I called them up, and they said, yeah, it's a 6-month to a year program. And I said, well, I can't do that. I've got bills, I've got child support, I've got this and that, things that I wasn't doing anyway, right? Things that I was squandering away. I was no type of father. My bills were getting past due. Wasn't paying rent anywhere. And so I was coming up with all these excuses. And then Blake Polston kept putting it in my ear. It's like, man, you really need to go. You really need to check it out. And so I called them in January of 2019 and found out how long it was and just didn't want to do it. 6 months later, after another car crash and just futile attempts to do anything, I finally decided, man, I got to do this. I escaped harming somebody in a car crash by the grace of God only. And so I hit my knees when I got home, and I said, God, I'm just ready. I need something. And so I called my mom, and I said, hey, I think I'm ready to go to John 3:16. Will you take me this weekend? And which is funny is it's a 6-month program, and 6 months after I said I didn't need it was the actual time that I went in, finally submitted. And so, yeah, I got into John 3:16 Ministries. You go down there, you sit through a Sunday service, you go through an interview, about 4 stages of interviews. They don't always let you in on the first time. I was there with my mom. My 2 boys were with me. who were 13 and 3 at the time. And interview was going good, and my oldest, he's known all my struggles. He's known the times I've went to jail. I've been really open and honest with my oldest son. And so it looked like we were getting in, and he said, "Dad, it looks like they're going to accept you. When do we bring you back?" And I was like, "Bubba, I'm not going home with you." And that was hard. And when they pulled off from that house, it really hit me about where I was at. You know, I was safe. I knew I was where I needed to be, but that was like a hard thing. It was like them driving away was almost like a wake-up call. Was like, you know, my addiction was about to take them away from me permanently. I was headed for jail time. I was headed for dying in a car crash. I was headed for that. And so I remember walking into my bedroom at John 3, and I sat in the recliner, tears rolling down my face. You know, I'm sad. I'm feeling sorry for myself. Look where I'm at. And I just said, "No, this isn't what I came here for." And so I got up, and a week later, I dropped to my knees, and I gave my life over to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I asked Him to change things about me, not just addiction. I didn't like myself sober. I didn't like myself drunk. I didn't like myself high. And so I knew that there was more work to be done in me than just not drink, right? I had to get rid of the way I talked, the thoughts that I had, the way I acted, the way I carried myself. I needed to completely change myself. And like I said earlier, that had to come from inside. And so that's how I got into recovery. Long story short, was a 6-month program at John 3:16 Ministries. That's where I decided that I had a calling on my life, that I wanted to help people in recovery. That's where I made the decision that I wanted to get involved with ministry, which now I'm going to NLC's School of Ministry. I'm in my 2nd semester there.
That's awesome.
And I felt a calling on my life, and so that's where it really started for me. Was I took that 6-month time as I had wasted enough time. At wherever point you're at in your recovery, if you're listening to this, if you're thinking about going into recovery, if you're early on, one thing we can all relate to is that in our addiction, we have wasted too much time of our life. I don't care if you're 18, if you're 40 like me. I got sober at 38. Wherever you're at, you've wasted enough time, and now every day that you wake up in recovery, you're building a brand new and a better life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you know, I love that you were able to accept going to that long time frame of recovery. And what I heard in all that was you had a spiritual awakening that brought about a psychic change. Mm-hmm. So for myself, there were times and periods where I would get clean for 30 or 60 days, but I never would stop all that other stuff.
Right.
You know, the men and the shopping and the, you know, the lying and the stealing and my mouth. My mouth is still an issue, okay? So all of those things never stopped. I thought that I could just not put one in me and still do all the other things. And what I found was when I was still doing all the other things, I hated myself that much more because now I didn't have, you know, a reason, an excuse to say, hey, I'm getting high because I don't like myself because of this.
Right.
And so then it became, I'm not getting high, but I'm still doing this, and I feel like crap about it. And so, you know, I love that you touched on you had to basically surrender and accept the fact that you needed something long term.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for myself, I went to 6 different state-funded places, you know, maybe more than that. I remember 6 staying there for a full period of time for 6 of them, but they were all 30 days at a time.
Yeah.
And then I would get out, and while I was in there, I would still be doing the shady business, you know, like talking to the wrong people or not following the rules appropriately or, you know, just submitting to the fact that I had a problem and I needed help.
Yeah.
And so I wish, you know, I know that I wouldn't be where I am now, but I wish that looking back in time, I had said, fine, I'll go to Teen Challenge. Fine, I'll go to John 3:17. Fine, I'll do that long thing.
Yeah.
You know, I really wish that I had done that at some points in time, just simply because if I had been able to have that rigorous get up, brush your teeth, make your bed, hit your knees, say your prayers, ask for God's help. You know, had I had that, I think that maybe I would have learned how to adult long before I was forced into learning to adult.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it does. Well, you know, we also need those guidelines. We don't realize that in addiction, we have similar patterns. They're just terrible for us.
Awful.
Like, wake up, get a drink before you go to work, stop at the liquor store on the way to work, get high on your break, right? We have these patterns, so when we go to another place and they have rules and you want to buck against them, people don't understand. You need those rules to change those habits so that those habits just become your normal everyday life. And now I don't have to wake up and remind myself to pray or remind myself not to drink. It's just part of my life. I don't do those things.
So I read somewhere not too long ago that it takes 90 days to break a habit. It takes 21 days to start a habit. So, you know, I'm just thinking to myself, all those years that I had that habit of get up, find what I need, do it, proceed to find on more of what I need to be able to make it through the day, thinking I'm going to hold on to this until tomorrow so I have something to wake up to, being too excited about having it and going ahead and then having to start the process all over the next day.
Yeah.
Like, thank God I don't have to be in that habit any longer.
Man,
you know?
It's just a prison.
It is a prison. It is the most horrific mental, emotional, spiritual prison that there could ever possibly be.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I can't remember the name for it, but it's one of those where you have people build their own prison and then they don't realize they're even in prison. And that's what addiction is. You know, you think you're free. Oh, I'm free to do whatever I want. I'll never submit to God because God has all these rules. I'll never go to a program. This program has rules. But in the same time, we are a slave to drugs and alcohol and sin, and we don't realize it because we think we're free to choose. But at the end, I was not free to make that choice. I had to drink. I had to drink when I got up. I had to drink before work started. I had to do those things to cope with my life.
There was absolutely no freedom in my life whatsoever.
None.
I was a slave to not only my drug, not only my drink, but all of the behaviors that came along with trying to produce my drug or my drink. And that's just, you know, those are horrifying thoughts anymore.
I know.
Absolutely horrifying thoughts. So you went to John 3:16. I'm going to tell you what, I'm watching the comments here, and you got a lot of people on here that are saying, hey, he is a cool cat. This is, what's up, Josh? And so Josh Ramsey's on there.
Hey.
Hey. And so Josh is one of our PACT peers, and he actually works out of 5 different counties. And so, you know, you and Josh had an opportunity to get close whenever you were at 316, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he had graduated a little bit before me, but he would come back and visit. And so I remember him. He doesn't know this, but, you know, some of the times he would get up in morning Bible study and talk, I would listen. I was always pay attention to the guys that came back. Always, you know, just to come back and share. Because I wasn't there to get caught up in the regular things. I was there because I'd made a decision to change my life. And when you make a decision to change your life, you'll do the uncomfortable things that people tell you to do, right? You'll go to the meetings, the 90 and 90. You'll find a sponsor. You'll work the steps. You'll go to meetings. You'll do that work that it takes.
That's absolutely right, you know, and it does take work. I don't know about anybody else, but it took work for me to say hi.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm going to do twice as much work to keep the life that I have, you know. So I want to know, now you talked a little bit about whenever you went into 316, you talked about having to look at your oldest son and say, I'm not going anywhere, I'm here, this is it. And how difficult that was.
Yeah.
So in getting ready for this interview, I have done nothing but heard, oh my God, he's the best dad ever. He has 2 wonderful sons. And so I just want to know, what is that relationship with your 2 boys like now?
It's amazing. You know, God's timing is perfect. And, you know, I got sober. My oldest son, he's about to be 16 now. And not only did I get sober, but I've been doing these other things, facilitating groups and doing life relaunches, which continuously work on myself as I help other men. So in that, I'm able to have conversations with my oldest son that are uncomfortable, but they're not uncomfortable, if that makes sense. You know, the talks about sex, the talks about the way the world is going to try and sway him to go this way or that way. And my son's been a Christ follower long before I was. I've been blessed. And then my 5-year-old, I've been anxious, so I share custody with him. So I've been able to go back and take life slowly with him and appreciate things. When my oldest was 5, I was a barely every other weekend dad. And now I'm blessed with getting to see my youngest son half the week. So it's almost like this perfect time. I'm able to be a great role model for my oldest who's becoming a young man. And I'm also able to just relive those days of what it's like to be a dad for the first time with my youngest. And so it's just perfect, man. I don't take anything for granted. Every day is a blessing. But yeah, that's all due to putting God first and putting recovery second in my life. And that's how I've done it. But yeah, it's been a blessing.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And so I love how you said that because, you know, the first 3 steps say, I can't.
Right.
God can. And I think I'm going to let him. And so, you know, God and recovery go hand in hand. There would be no recovery if it weren't for God, right?
Right.
And so I think it's great that you talk about that, you know, and I have a lot of emotion right now because, you know, listening to you speak and hearing all of the things that people are saying about you, you know, and there are so many people who, you know, really respect you and what you are doing as a father and a single father at that, you know.
I have help. I'm not going to call myself a single father.
Well, you know what, I
great
get it.
Support system. Hi, Mom. I know you're out there crying right now, so I just want to say hi and I love you.
You know, and that's amazing. That's amazing. And it does take all that support system, you know, and let's talk about this. I want to learn about your life relaunch seminars, but going from parenting into that recovery community. So, you know, I know all of us back in the 90s heard Hillary Clinton talk about it takes a village. So recovery it takes a village. 100% in all aspects of recovery.
Yeah.
So tell me about you setting up your own recovery community, how important that is, and lead us into what Life Relaunch seminars are.
Sure. Yeah, so, you know, when I submitted myself to John 3:16, it meant submitting to whatever they required of me to do while I was there and what they recommended you do when you get out, just like a secular place, right? Get set up with IOPs or continued counseling or sober living. So with them, it was get plugged into a church, which I did. I came back to Little Rock. I got plugged in with a good friend of mine, Blake Polston, who's been on this show before, runs M18. And he opened a couple doors for me. And then as you walk through doors and you keep being in obedience, more doors open up. And so a month out of John 3, after getting plugged in with Blake Polston, I was allowed to come do Bible studies with some of his guys in the morning. And then he said, hey, I want to invite you to go through this thing called a Life Relaunch. wecan.org and liferelaunch.org are the websites. It was this curriculum. It's a 2-day seminar. It started in Florida, and it was taken into prison systems to help guys that were about to re-enter. It got such great feedback in the community that just regular people started going through it. It's made its way through, I don't know how many states, but then it came to Arkansas. And I was privy to go through that back in January of 19, so I'm a month out of John 3. I'm going through this seminar on spiritual warfare and healing from wounds, and I just came out of a 6-month place. I'm thinking, what is this going to do for me? Like, I'm good, right? I went 6 months somewhere. But the way it's set up, and it talks about spiritual warfare, and it talks about, you know, the healings from father wounds and where we get our validation from. And I got a lot of healing out of that, and I said, man, I'd really like to be involved in this, and they asked me to come back and facilitate. So the first time I get to facilitate one, which I've done 13 or 14 now, I've even led a couple myself. We get to go to beautiful places. The lodge at John 3, Fawn Hollow has a good lodge. So it's like a men's retreat. We take guys from the Other Side Ministry in Heber Springs, Complete in Christ out of Searcy. You got the M18 guys. You've got Hope Alive in Morrilton. And so we really take guys, they're more receptible when you're in recovery. You're more susceptible to healing as opposed to taking someone who doesn't realize they need help, like just your average person on the street. So that's why we primarily use faith-based recovery guys. But yeah, it's a 2-day. It's very intense. Guys get a lot of healing. The crux of this, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but the crux of this is writing a letter to yourself that you wish your father would have written you. And so for me, I got a lot of healing out of that. That's when I kind of realized some of the things. My dad was just a guy, this and that. So then through Life Relaunch, a couple guys went through. The first one I facilitated, one of them being Kyle Brewer, another one being Russell Boyd. I found out they were Jeremy Burton as well. Shout out to him at Nehemiah House. So I met Kyle Brewer. I get to chop it up with him, Russell Boyd. And I said, man, I just want to get involved, right? I don't have enough clean time to become a peer, but I know that's the goal I wanted to have. And so Russell Boyd was like, yeah, you know, he was working at the jail at the time. he said, you know, I think I can get you in if you want to come teach a class there, facilitate. And I said, yeah. Anytime I asked someone for help and they offered me something, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it, before I could get introverted and overthink it and say I don't deserve to be there, I'm not good enough. And so that's where it started. I spent a year of my life building community by volunteering. I taught classes or facilitated groups at Hope Alive, at M18, at the Pulaski County Jail Reentry Center. I got privy to Series 33, which is based off Authentic Manhood, a book written by, I think the guy's name's Robert Kelly. And in that, as I'm facilitating groups and helping other guys walk through the process, I'm healing myself and I'm becoming a better man, right? I'm learning things about myself. I'm able to have conversations with my friends, with my family, with my son about things that I would have never thought about, because not only do I look at things through the eyes of a child who had a dad in addiction. It was just a normal guy, right, that just didn't have the tools. He was never given the help I got, right? So I was able to break that generational curse. But now I'm able to look at what type of wounds am I afflicting into my son's life. And I think as parents in addiction, we don't see that a lot. I was giving my son every excuse in the book to grow up and be an alcoholic, right? He had the perfect excuse. His dad's an alcoholic. And so now it changes the way I view fatherhood, is because I look at, okay, how is this impacting my son's life long term, not just what type of man. You know, I don't want to raise my son to be a particular way. I want to encourage my son to grow and develop the way he wants to. I've never been that, you know, that dad that pushes you into sports or pushes you into this and that. We've done sports, we've not done sports. I've loved watching my son grow. I just want to be an encourager. And so that's what Life Relaunch did for me. It's a 2-day seminar. You can jump on those websites I mentioned, and it's just 2 days, and it's intensive. It's spiritual warfare. It's stuff I love. I love talking about spiritual warfare. I don't think people talk about it enough. I think we are living in a world where we're attacked spiritually every single day, and I think that's why a lot of people get trapped in addiction. And so through Life Relaunch, I've built that community. I've built communities with Russell Boyd, Kyle Brewer, Blake Polston, Jay Cupid, Dr. Larry Pillow, Tim Lawson. And through all that, I continue to just grow. You know, I've had a circle of friends in my life that I was only friends with them because we got drunk or high together at a bar.
Right.
And so to develop, you know, you get early in recovery and you don't know anybody and you're still kind of anxious and you don't want to share at these meetings and groups. But find that common goal in that first group, is that everybody there is there for at least one thing you have in common, is that you don't want to get drunk or high anymore for that day. And that's a great starting point to build a relationship.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. You know, that's the premise of well, all of it, everything that we do. It's, you know, we all have a commonality, and you know, finding that commonality is what leads us into our recovery and our community, our recovery community, whatever that may be. And that goes back to being a peer specialist in different pathways. I mean, it all works the same. We all have the same common goal. And so, you know, that sounds fantastic. I mean, I love the idea, I love the premise, and being able to go back and work through all of those things so that you don't have to carry them with you anymore.
Right.
Like, that's a big deal.
It really is.
A really big deal. JJ on here from M18, yeah, he's talking about how great you are.
Wow.
And so, you know, he has seen God move in your life, and he's so absolutely grateful to be a part of your life, you know?
Love you, JJ.
I mean, I hear nothing but good things about you. And so, you know, I met you, 8 months? It's been 8 months ago.
Somewhere around there, yeah, time
January,
flies.
February. It was January, February, whenever I was volunteering at Wolf Street Foundation. Shout out Wolf Street. And we came over to Serenity Park right after you first got hired, and we talked a little bit about what they offer. And so, and I've seen you become, you know, very quickly get connected in the community and become a pillar in our community.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I mean, it's the absolute truth, you know. So, you know, it's fantastic to be able to talk about all of these things, and this goes back to what I like to call my mantra, which is, you know, love God and love people.
Yeah.
You know, and as long as we're loving God, then we're going to love people, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, I can see him working in ways in your life that are attractive beyond compare, and that's something that we all want. When we look at people who are pillars in our recovery community, we look at them and we say, what do they have that I want, and how do I get that?
Yeah.
And that's part of coming into the recovery world. This person has what I want. How do I get it? Where can I find it? Who can I talk to? And so, that's why we have people like you on this show. You can shout out. So, I want to know, what does your future look like? We talked a little bit about that prior to coming on the air. I want to know, what does Josh's future look like? Where do you want to go? Where do you see God taking you?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've been asked that before, and this isn't a cop-out answer, but anytime I had a vision for my life, I messed it up. So I've just been trusting God, and I just keep going through the doors He opens. We speak on community. When I met Kyle Brewer a year later is actually my foot in the door to get into Serenity Park. He put in a good word for me. He knew somebody that was looking for somebody. And so I'm just so new to this whole world of recovery as far as as a profession, career type thing. So I don't know what the future holds. I know the future is very bright. Do I have time to touch on Serenity Park, what we're doing there?
Yeah,
okay.
Very quickly.
Okay. So Discharge Coordinator at Serenity Park is what I came in doing. They had it in a way where they wanted to hire a Discharge Coordinator and allow him to become a peer specialist. I couldn't have asked for a better group of people. I work, everything there starts when someone answers the phone in admissions. You got Khaki McClellan, who's actually teaching yoga to some of our guys right now, and we got Matt Brooks. I've seen these people stay on the phone for 30, 45 minutes doing a phone screen, talking to moms and families, assuring them what it looks like to come in here. And so I've just been so blessed to be a part of a family. Most of the people at Serenity Park, counselors, all the way from the high-ups to the guys that work on the weekend, we're in recovery. How often do you get to go talk to a counselor that is actually in recovery?
Right.
And so I've just been blessed beyond measure to be a part of a family that looks at recovery as a family. It doesn't look at this recovery world as a competition.
No, they don't.
And so, and I just, my role there is a peer specialist, but I've been blessed because I get to see guys come in younger than me, my age, present. So it's like my past, present, and future every day I walk into work.
Right.
And so for some guys, I'm like a big brother. For some guys, I'm like a son figure. For some guys, I'm just like a guy walking through it. But like you said, I'm just a person a little farther down the road than they are. That's how I look at myself. I stay humble with it. You tell me I'm a pillar. That's great. I'm just getting up and doing what I'm supposed to do. And if somebody looks at me as a pillar, that's great. Come stand beside me and be a pillar too. I'm not trying to outshine anybody. I'm just trying to be a light just like everybody else is. Just to show people that there's a way out. I felt like that was a calling. I've had people call me a cool cat. It's funny you say that. I've always had that role in my addiction. You can tell I wanted that. I've got the tattoos. I've got the look, whatever. I've always had people drawn to me, but I always had them drawn to me for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And I was always a terrible role model. And so now it's just like, when you change that life, when you make that crossover, and I'm living for God now. So God has just shown me that those were just spiritual gifts I was using the wrong way.
Right.
And so now that I'm walking in the path, walking in the light, I'm naturally going to draw people to me. And it's taken me a long time to deal with that. It takes me, I'm still not good with taking compliments very well. I like to stay humble with it, but I've accepted that I'm answering a calling put onto my life, and with that comes responsibility, and I just take that wholeheartedly.
That's phenomenal, and we're getting ready to wrap up here, but I just want to go back and touch base about Serenity Park. So just recently they had the recovery celebration in remembrance of Joe McQueenie.
Yeah.
And I got this fantastic shirt. On the back it says
locked up, covered up, or sobered up.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so right outside of Serenity Park, they have these signs that say that and point different directions. And there's a graveyard, and there's a jail right down the road, and then there's, the option to go right there. And so, the people there, like Tucker Martin and Khaki McClellan and, everybody there, their whole thought process is this is not a competition. We're not trying to get someone to choose between you and me to go to recovery. We don't care where you go, just go to recovery,
exactly.
Get there.
Yeah.
And so, having that lookout on the recovery world and everything is just fantastic. So, Josh, that was great.
Thank you.
Very great.
It was fun.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
I just want to say one more time, for all of you peers, please check your email. Vote, vote, vote. And in 2 weeks, we will be live at the peer conference. And Josh is going to be there as well, all right?
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So everybody, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. It's been a great show. I hope everybody has a great week. If you have a problem, if you need some help, if you're out there, you're alone and you're hurting, please just message us on the Recovery Clinic and we will be more than happy to help you. Everybody, I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.
See ya.